All she wanted was a project, a chance to escape the noise in her head, and maybe flip a few forgotten antiques for cash. When Madison Bell won a storage unit for $100, she expected rusted tools, old furniture, maybe a bike or two. But beneath a stained tarp at the back was something that didn't belong, something that pulsed with quiet danger. And when she finally pulled the tarp away, what she found made her heart drop and drew the attention of local police, federal agents, and an entire town haunted by a crime long buried. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from, and if stories like this pull you in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Tomorrow's episode is even more unbelievable than this one. Now buckle up. This one starts quiet, but ends with sirens. The sun hung low over the cracked asphalt lot, baking the corrugated walls of the storage facility in a dull orange glow. Madison Bell leaned against the hood of her old Tacoma, arms crossed, her thumb nervously tapping the seam of her jeans. She hadn't planned to be here today. Hadn't planned much of anything lately, really, but the auction flyer fluttering under her windshield wiper at the gas station that morning felt like a sign. A distraction. Maybe even an opportunity. She hadn't flipped furniture in weeks. Not since her partner moved out and left more than just silence behind. Her tools sat cold in the garage. Her bank account hovered just above zero. So when the auctioneer's voice called for final bids on Unit 47, and no one else raised a hand, Madison stepped forward. $100, she said, louder than she expected. A few bidders glanced her way with raised eyebrows. One older man near the back muttered, "It's all junk, sweetheart." But she didn't care. There was something about the shape buried deep in the shadows of that unit, under a sagging tarp, framed by leaning cardboard boxes and a broken armchair. Something that looked like it didn't belong. Not trash. Not treasure. Just out of place. The auctioneer shrugged and banged his gavel. Sold. Unit 47 to the young lady in the boots. Keys changed hands. Paperwork was signed. And as the crowd began to scatter toward the other units, Madison stood at the roll-up door, staring into the dim belly of her newest gamble. The unit stank like mildew and damp paper. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of light from a hole in the roof. There were boxes stacked haphazardly, some caved in from age and weight. An old bicycle leaned sideways against a tower of crates. The faded armchair's cushion was split wide open, leaking yellow foam like insulation. To most eyes, it looked like a pile of regrets. But to Madison, who had built her small life from roadside rescues and rehab junk, it looked like a puzzle, and she needed something to solve. She grabbed the flashlight from her truck and ducked inside. The air was close, stale, and thick. Her boots crunched across layers of old newspapers and brittle cardboard. One box was labeled Xmas 2002 and filled with tangled lights and broken ornaments. Another spilled VHS tapes, all blank. She moved slowly, methodically, tugging boxes aside, peeking into drawers, lifting old tarps that revealed nothing but dust and disappointment. But the big one, the shape that had caught her eye, sat still in the back like it had been waiting for her. The tarp draped over it was different, thicker, stained with water damage and something darker she couldn't name. It didn't move in the breeze, it just loomed. Silent. Unsettling. She knelt beside it and ran her fingers along the edge, feeling sharp corners through the fabric. Not a couch, not a fridge, something boxy. Steel. Her flashlight caught a faint outline, and what looked like stenciled writing beneath a layer of dust. Her heart ticked faster. She wasn't sure what she had just bought, but something told her it wasn't furniture, and it wasn't meant to be found. The morning after the auction, Madison came back with coffee, gloves, and a stubborn resolve she hadn't felt in months. She parked close, popped the tailgate, and loaded her cart with contractor bags, a pry bar, and a dust mask. Not because she expected anything hazardous, but because she knew what mold and rot could do to a good pair of lungs. Unit 47 still stood there with its door rolled halfway up, like a mouth caught mid-sentence, waiting to finish a thought it never meant to speak. She pulled the door open all the way. The inside smelled worse than she remembered, like rain-soaked plywood and forgotten time. She started with the front, dragging boxes into the light and sorting them by instinct. Trash, junk, maybe. Nothing had been touched in years. Christmas decorations with melted tinsel, a warped coffee table with one missing leg, a shoebox full of cassette tapes labeled Mike's Beats, each one handwritten and smudged. She chuckled once, then tossed them in the maybe pile. After an hour, she peeled off her gloves, wiped her face with the back of her arm, and stared deeper into the shadows where the tarp still waited. Something about it made her stomach feel like it was sitting on bad brakes. The rest of the unit seemed like someone's messy attempt at a life reboot. Half-packed boxes, random personal items, nothing consistent. No themes, no patterns. Like someone had started to move and quit halfway. But that tarp, that shape, it was too deliberate, too square, too still. Madison took a slow breath and stepped forward. The tarp was cinched with a bungee cord at the base. She knelt and unclipped it, letting it snap back like a slingshot. The smell hit her immediately, old oil and metal and something faintly chemical. She coughed once, waved her hand in front of her face, and pulled the tarp upward in one long, deliberate motion. What stood beneath it wasn't furniture. It was a crate. Military style. Gunmetal gray. Reinforced corners. Handles welded flush. Locks not one, but 3 big and mechanical, with heavy-duty keyholes and scuffs around each one. The crate looked like it had been shipped through a war zone and left behind on purpose. Madison circled it slowly. No markings at first. But then, just along the top edge near the back, her flashlight caught at a faded white stencil, property of U.S. Gov. Clearance. LVL. D4. She blinked. Her pulse quickened. Not because she knew what D4 meant. She didn't. But because this didn't belong in a civilian storage unit. This was the kind of thing you saw behind fences, under guard, or bolted inside bunkers. Not stuffed between a pink velvet armchair and a broken blender. She reached into her cart and pulled out the pry bar. The lock stared back at her like eyes that didn't blink. She hesitated. Then she wedged the bar into the seam and leaned in. Metal groaned. Something inside shifted. Heavy. Solid. Then something clattered against the inside wall. Fast. Sharp. Metallic. Not loose junk. Something. Contained. Madison stepped back. The hairs on her arms stood straight up. She wasn't sorting through trash anymore. She had just disturbed something that had been waiting, and it wasn't meant to be moved. Madison didn't sleep that night. Even after locking the unit and double-checking the gate behind her, the image of that crate clung to her like dust in her lungs. She had tried to distract herself, made dinner, scrolled through her phone, even queued up an old sitcom she used to love. But nothing worked. Every time she blinked, she saw the stencil. Clearance 50L. D4. Government. Military. Forgotten. Or hidden. By morning, she was back at the unit. The sun hadn't cleared the trees yet, but her boots were already crunching gravel. She rolled the door up slowly, half expecting the crate to be gone. But there it was, still looming under the stripped tarp, still sealed like it was daring her to try again. She didn't bring gloves this time, didn't bring a mask, just brought the pry bar and her resolve. She stepped closer. "Okay," she whispered to no one. "Let's find out what's so special about you." She slipped the bar under the first lock and leaned hard. It creaked, resisted, then snapped free with a sharp clang that echoed across the empty units. The second lock took more force. She wedged the bar deep into the seam, using the edge for leverage until it gave with a violent pop. The third one was different, rusted, and someone had jammed something into the keyhole, like they'd tried to break it open once and gave up. She used the bar like a chisel, hammering it down with her palm, over and over. Pain bloomed up her wrist, but then a final crack. The lock shattered. Madison stepped back, breathing hard. She wiped sweat from her temple and placed her hands on the lid. It was cold, heavier than she expected. She lifted not all the way, just enough to break the seal, and a hiss of stale air escaped. Chemical. Acrid. Her eyes watered. She pushed the lid all the way up. Inside, layers of tightly packed gear stared back at her. Not weapons, not supplies, but something worse. The first item was a tactical vest, neatly folded. Still smelled like sweat and metal. Next to it, 3 burner phones, old models, charged, screens black. Beneath them, a hard-sided case filled with zip-sealed evidence bags, all empty, all labeled with date fields and case numbers. Madison's stomach churned. She pulled out a second-tier tray and found a canvas roll tied with nylon cord. She unwrapped it and froze. Inside were tools, lockpicks, wire snips, a flash drive, a folding blade, each piece black, compact, and polished like they'd been used often and recently. The flash drive was labeled in faded red Sharpie, X47, field log. Her throat tightened. This wasn't some forgotten storage haul. This was deliberate, sealed, buried. At the bottom of the crate, she found a rolled canvas map, unlabeled. No roads, just topography. One red X drawn in the middle of nowhere, pine country just outside of town. And beside it, in block letters, someone had scrawled, "Do not dig." Madison stared at the words. Her breath came shallow now. She had bought a box of ghosts, and one of them was about to wake. The morning light didn't reach far inside the unit, but Madison didn't need brightness anymore. The crate had its own gravity, its own strange hush that swallowed time. She sat cross-legged in front of it, gloves discarded, heart steady only because it hadn't decided whether to panic or not. The crate was open, its contents spread across the cracked concrete like puzzle pieces too sharp to handle barehanded. She held the flash drive in her fingers, turning it over like it might explain itself. No markings except the faded label, X47, field log. No brand, no serial number. The plastic was scraped in a way that looked deliberate, like someone had tried to erase where it had come from. She considered plugging it into her laptop right there, but stopped herself. Not out here, not without backup, not without knowing who, or what, might be watching. Instead, she turned her attention back to the bottom of the crate. Wedged beneath the tactical vest was a small black duffel bag, zipped and locked with a TSA-style clasp. She tugged the zipper hard enough that the lock snapped. Inside were more evidence bags, not empty this time. The first one contained a rusted pocket knife. The second, a torn piece of fabric. The third was worse. It held a driver's license. Madison squinted at it. Georgia. Faded. Female. The photo was blurry from moisture, but the name was still legible. Amanda Keller, Dobb. The 18th of February, 1988. The name sat like a brick in her chest. She knew it. Not well, but well enough. Amanda Keller had gone missing nearly 20 years ago, when Madison was still in middle school. It had been on the news. On every front porch. Flyers stapled to telephone poles, her high school yearbook reprinted with blank space where Amanda's senior portrait should have been. Everyone assumed she'd run away, or worse, but no one ever found her. Madison's hands began to shake. She set the license down gently and stared into the crate like it might explain itself. A tactical vest, burner phones, field tools, a labeled drive, an unregistered map with a marked dig site, and now, this. Something wasn't just off. This wasn't a mistake. It was a message. A box meant to be found, or meant to never be found, and she had just broken the rules. She backed out of the unit slowly, eyes darting toward the fence line like she expected someone to be watching. The place was still, silent except for the distant hum of traffic, but her instincts had changed. The hairs on the back of her neck wouldn't settle. She needed to get the flash drive to her laptop. Alone. Quietly. Before anything else. Madison didn't pack anything up. She didn't clean the scene or try to hide what she'd opened. She locked the unit, shoved the flash drive into her jacket pocket, and left everything else exactly where it was. Some part of her already knew. This wasn't just a cold case. This was an operation, and someone had just reopened it. The map was tucked in her passenger seat, still curled at the edges from being rolled inside the crate. Madison had smoothed it out the night before, weighed down by coffee mugs and old receipts, and stared at it like it might blink back. There were no roads, no compass rose. Just faded topography lines and terrain-shading pine forest, steep inclines, and a single red X at the edge of what she guessed was the northern ridge of Hollow Pines State Preserve. She hadn't been out there since high school. A senior bonfire party, cheap beer, the night she first kissed Ethan Monroe, and thought that meant something. That forest held old memories, but now it seemed to hold something far older and far darker. She left before sunrise, told no one. Packed her bag with gloves, a flashlight, and her father's old hunting knife, the one he left her when he passed, and she hadn't touched in years. The road out of town wound through empty farmland and fields dulled by drought. By the time the sun started rising, the trees had swallowed the road. The trailhead was unmarked. She parked behind a thicket, left the truck hidden, and started walking. The air was heavy with late summer humidity. Mosquitoes buzzed. Her boots sank into soft ground with each step. She used her phone for GPS at first, but once the signal dropped, it was just the map, the red X, and instinct. Madison wasn't a survivalist. She wasn't brave, exactly. But whatever was buried out here had already gotten under her skin, and turning back felt worse than pushing forward. It took nearly an hour to reach the ridge. When she crested it, breath short and shirt soaked through, she saw it a clearing no wider than a living room, ringed by trees leaning inward like they didn't want to see. At the center was a mound of rocks, unnatural, piled like someone had tried to make it look like nothing at all. But she saw it, the shape, the intention, the disturbance. She stepped into the clearing, boots crunching gravel, and crouched beside the rocks. She pulled her gloves on, her hands already trembling, and began to lift them one by one. Sweat rolled down her back. The smell came first, musty, metallic, like old water and rusted hinges. Then she uncovered it. A locker. Metal. Standard issue. Dented. Padlocked tight. Madison sat back on her heels and stared. She didn't say a word, didn't breathe for a moment. Then she slid the pry bar from her pack and jammed it into the lock. The metal groaned once, then snapped. The lid creaked open on rusted hinges, and inside were dozens of photographs. She reached in, her fingers numb. Every photo was cataloged, labeled in red pen, dates, names, coordinates. Some showed people, others places. Surveillance shots, black and white and grainy. One showed a girl, brown hair, jean jacket, wide eyes, standing at a bus stop. The name scribbled beneath made her stomach drop. Amanda Keller. The 4th of June, 2006. Last seen. Madison dropped the photo like it burned. She wasn't just following a trail anymore. She had walked into the middle of something that was never meant to be solved. And now, she wasn't alone. Behind her, a twig snapped. Madison didn't turn around right away. The snap of the twig behind her was soft, almost casual, the kind of sound the forest makes 100 times a minute. But this one felt different. Intentional. Close. She reached slowly into her backpack, fingers brushing the worn handle of her father's hunting knife, still sheathed. Her pulse thudded in her ears, louder than the breeze, louder than her breath. Seconds stretched, then silence. She spun, knife in hand, but the clearing behind her was empty. No footsteps, no voice, no movement in the brush, nothing. She stood there for a long time, every hair on her body alert, waiting for something to move again. But it didn't. Either it was just a deer, or someone had already seen enough and backed away. She didn't wait to find out. She jammed the photos back into the locker, closed the lid, and stacked the rocks again like she'd never been there. She stuffed the map back in her bag, retraced her steps out of the woods as fast as her legs would move, and didn't stop until she reached her truck. The moment she shut the door, her hands started shaking. It wasn't adrenaline anymore. It was fear. Real, cold fear that settled into the pit of her gut like a stone. She sat behind the wheel, phone in her lap, and stared at the contact list. Scrolled past friends she hadn't spoken to in months. Past her mother, who would only ask what she was doing out there in the first place. Past Ethan, whose number she hadn't deleted but couldn't bring herself to call. Then she typed in 3 numbers. 911. She hesitated for the briefest moment before hitting dial. The dispatcher answered in a flat tone. 911. What's your emergency? Madison cleared her throat. I found something. Something I think the police need to see. It's in a storage unit I bought at auction. The dispatcher asked for details. Madison gave her the unit number, the address, and a short version of the truth. She didn't mention the flash drive or the forest. Not yet. Just the crate. The bag. The license. That was enough. Within 30 minutes, 2 marked cruisers pulled into the storage lot. Madison stood outside Unit 47, arms folded tight, trying to look calm. She couldn't stop replaying everything in her head. The photographs, the name, that face. Amanda Keller, a ghost from her town's past, a wound no one had ever fully let go of. When the officers arrived, they didn't act surprised, just careful. One older, one younger. The older one introduced himself as Detective Shaw. He listened without interrupting as Madison walked him through what she'd found. His eyes narrowed when she showed him the license. The evidence bags. The tactical vest. You said you bought this unit legally? He asked. She nodded. Paid $100. Didn't know what was inside. He stared at the crate for a long time before motioning to his partner. They began taking photos. Then bagging everything. Gloves on. Radios crackling. A quiet urgency, but no panic. It felt rehearsed. Then Shaw turned to her again. Did you find anything else? Madison hesitated. Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. He looked her in the eye. Madison, we need to know if anything else came with this crate. She took a breath, pulled the flash drive from her pocket. I haven't opened it yet, she said. He took it gently. Examined the faded label. Said nothing. Then, as his partner zipped the last evidence bag shut, Shaw turned back one more time. Did you tell anyone else what you found? The question landed hard. Not what she found. Who knew? She shook her head. No, just you. He studied her a beat too long, then nodded. Let's keep it that way. By the following morning, Unit 47 no longer belonged to her. A police-issued evidence seal stretched across the door like a cautionary whisper, and the storage lot, once quiet and half forgotten, now buzzed with quiet authority. 2 more cruisers had appeared during the night, joined by an unmarked SUV with government plates and windows too dark to see through. Madison watched from her truck across the lot, coffee untouched in her cup holder, hands curled tight around the steering wheel. The crate was gone, the unit empty, but the echo of what she'd found still lived inside her chest. She wasn't imagining it anymore. This was real, and it had rippled out faster than she could have predicted. Just after noon, Detective Shaw called. His voice was even, professional, but less guarded than before. We traced the crate, he said. It was supposed to be decommissioned in 2012 after a cold case task force was disbanded. The records were sealed, but someone diverted it. Hid it. You weren't meant to find it. Madison didn't know what to say. You mentioned the name Amanda Keller, he continued. That name, that case, it's part of what the task force was investigating. You've opened something that was never meant to be touched again. So what happens now? She asked. There was a pause. Then, the Keller family was notified this morning. Her mother cried when we showed her the license. Madison closed her eyes. All those years, all that silence, broken by a box stuffed in a forgotten storage unit. But it didn't feel like closure. It felt like a warning. That afternoon, the agents arrived. Federal, she could tell by the posture, the clipped movements, the way they didn't smile, They carried sleek black cases and spoke into radios she couldn't hear. One of them, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a gray braid, stopped beside Madison's truck and handed her a clipboard. "We'll need you to sign a confidentiality form," the woman said, "until the investigation concludes." Madison scanned it. Pages of legal silence. She hesitated. "What if I refuse?" The woman didn't blink. "Then you'll be subpoenaed, questioned, and probably named in every headline for the next 6 months." Madison signed, not because she was scared, but because she wasn't ready to lose control of the story. Not yet. That evening, she returned home and found an envelope taped to her front door. No postage, no return address. Just her name, written in sharp, slanted letters. Inside was a single photo. Black and white. A surveillance shot, grainy and high contrast. Her, standing outside Unit 47, flash drive in hand. The message was clear. She wasn't the only one watching, and whoever sent that envelope wanted her to know. Some things aren't meant to be dug up. At first, she thought he was just part of the cleanup. Another plainclothes officer, maybe federal, maybe just local support. But something about the way he stood, too still, too rehearsed, sent a chill across her skin. Madison spotted him 2 days after the agents packed up and left the unit sealed. He was across the street from her apartment, just outside the gas station, leaning against a nondescript silver sedan with tinted windows and a state inspection sticker 2 years out of date. He wasn't looking directly at her. Not yet. But he didn't have to. She felt it anyway. He wore a windbreaker. Light gray, zipped to the collar despite the heat. And on his left shoulder, a faded patch dark triangle, 3 horizontal lines stitched like bars or slashes. It didn't match any law enforcement insignia she recognized. But when her eyes landed on it, something deep in her chest tightened. It was the same shape she'd seen stenciled on the crate back in Unit 47. She turned back inside her apartment and locked the door behind her. Twice. That night, she stayed off her phone. She didn't email. She didn't sleep. Every sound outside her window made her heart jump. But no one knocked. No one came. Just the wind. Just the quiet. Until morning. When she went to check her mailbox, the lock was broken, the door pried open, hinges splintered. Inside was nothing. Not even junk mail. Just the hollow sound of metal when she tapped the back wall with her key. Someone had been inside, and they wanted her to know. The next day, her phone rang. Blocked number. She answered anyway. "You should stop asking questions," said the voice. Male. Calm. Not familiar. What's buried should stay buried. The line went dead before she could respond. She went straight to the police. Detective Shaw wasn't surprised. He didn't say it aloud, but Madison could read it in his face. This went higher than he could touch. He took her statement, nodded along, promised to file a report. But something in his tone had changed. Less urgency, more caution. That night, Madison did the only thing she could think to do. She took every photo she'd snapped of the crate, the forest, the drive, the locker, everything except the photos she had turned over, and uploaded them anonymously to a secure blog she created on a burner laptop. She titled it, Storage Unit 47, What I Wasn't Supposed to Find. No name, no mention of her hometown, just images, questions, the facts. Then, she hit publish. It took less than 12 hours for it to spread. Local Reddit boards, conspiracy threads. A few true crime YouTubers picked it up. By day 2, one post was trending. Who is the woman behind Unit 47? Madison didn't want fame. She wanted protection. The more eyes on her, the harder she was to erase. But as she sat in her darkened apartment, the laptop screen glowing soft blue, she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over, not by a long shot, and that somewhere out there, the man in the jacket was still watching. The emails came first encrypted, anonymous, some barely legible. Messages from people claiming to know about Unit 47. Some were hoaxes. Madison could tell right away. But one stood out. A single line. No greeting. No name. Keller wasn't the only one. Look into case file 19B, Midwest Archive. Floor 3. She stared at the screen. Her blog post had struck a nerve, and someone, somewhere, wanted her to dig deeper. But it wasn't fear that settled into her bones this time. It was something steadier. Purpose. She had never asked for this story, but now that it was in her hands, she couldn't walk away from it. Not when families were still living without answers. Not when her own past was suddenly wrapped in it. That afternoon, Madison sat at her workbench, staring at the flash drive she still hadn't plugged in. Every part of her screamed to do it now. But she didn't want to see those files alone, so she picked up her phone and called someone she hadn't spoken to in years. "Ethan?" she said when he answered. "I need a favor. It's about Amanda Keller." There was a long silence. Then, "Where do I meet you?" They met in the back office of the small community college, where Ethan now taught journalism. The place smelled like stale coffee and dusty textbooks, but it felt safe, familiar. He plugged in the drive and opened the only folder inside. Field Log X47. Inside, scans of field notes, redacted surveillance memos, photo logs, and audio recordings, dozens of them, of interviews never released to the public. One by one, the files revealed a pattern. Young women, late teens to early 20s, gone missing between 2003 and 2009, spread across state lines, never linked together officially. All with similarities too specific to be coincidence: late-night disappearances, no bodies found, and each one, somewhere in the report, had a mention of an off-the-books investigation unit, code-named Echo Tier. Echo Tier wasn't local. It wasn't federal in any traditional sense either. It was something else. Something between built to chase ghosts, but buried when the trail got too close to someone important. Madison and Ethan sat in stunned silence as the weight of it hit them. "This isn't just about Amanda," Ethan said quietly. "This is a pattern, a cover-up." Madison nodded. "And we just tore the lid off it." "Oh." They uploaded the full contents of the drive to 3 separate servers, hidden, encrypted, distributed to watchdog journalists and small press outlets Madison had found in her research. She didn't go to the big networks. She went to the ones that didn't flinch. By the end of the week, the story had exploded. Underground task force, tied to cold case disappearances. Leaked files suggest federal complicity in missing persons cases. Woman behind Unit 47 speaks out. "We were never supposed to know." She gave one interview. Audio only. No video, no last name. She spoke calmly, clearly. Not like someone scared, but like someone finally telling the truth. "I didn't want to find this," she said. "But once I did, I couldn't unsee it. And now that you see it too, it belongs to all of us." And just like that, she wasn't just the woman who found something buried. She was the voice of the people still lost. The storm passed quietly. Not all storms come with thunder, some settle like dust after a long silence. In the months that followed, Madison Bell watched the world shift around her. The blog had become something larger, a hub for cold case families and citizen sleuths. Reporters picked up the story and followed the leads she'd uncovered. Arrests were made quiet ones, buried deep in back pages and press releases that said more in what they omitted. The task force code name, Echo Tier, was never officially acknowledged. But it didn't matter. People were paying attention now. Amanda Keller's mother sent a handwritten note. No return address, just a simple card. "Thank you for remembering her." Madison pinned it above her workbench. The unit, of course, was long gone. Cleared out, cataloged, turned into evidence. But not everything from that day had been handed over. There was one item she kept. It had been wedged in the broken frame of the pink velvet armchair, something she almost didn't see. A small, unmarked wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, sealed with dark red wax and no hinge. No markings, no latch. Just wax and wood and silence. She hadn't opened it, not after the crate, Not after the woods. Not after the phone calls and federal warnings. Something about it felt different. Sacred, even. As if whatever was inside wasn't meant to expose a system or solve a mystery, but to remain untouched. It sat now on the shelf above her desk, surrounded by stacks of notebooks and a coffee mug stained with ink. Every now and then, she reached up and touched it, not to open, but to remind herself that there are some answers the world doesn't get to have. Some truths are allowed to rest. She was painting again. Not furniture this time. Canvases, landscapes, mostly. Quiet places, forest paths, distant lights behind windows. She didn't sell them, didn't even sign them. But something about the slow rhythm of color and brushstroke helped her sleep at night in a way she hadn't before. Ethan came by sometimes. They didn't talk about what happened much. They didn't need to. Some stories only make sense in silence. He helped her set up a small donation program. Proceeds from her blog and artwork went toward missing persons cases, independent investigators, grief counselors. She called it Echo Light. A flicker of something good left in the wake of what they uncovered. And every once in a while, someone new would show up, a mother, a brother, a friend of someone whose name was nearly forgotten, asking if she could help, if she could just take a look. She always did. Not because she was brave, not because she was an expert, but because she knew what it felt like to find something you weren't meant to find, and to be changed by it. That's what the storage unit had become, in the end. Not just a box full of buried secrets. It was a doorway, one she hadn't asked for, but had walked through anyway. And on the other side, a life she never expected, a purpose she hadn't known she was missing, and a quiet, sealed box. Still unopened, still waiting, but maybe that was enough.